Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. Today, I have a topic for you that I find super interesting. And even though I will present you with my arguments and what I think about it, I want you guys to know that I'm always open to change my mind if evidence ever suggests otherwise. But at the moment, this is really what I think. And the topic is whether science can prove magic. Is it possible for science, any type of science, to prove the effectiveness, the realness, the existence of magic? My answer to that question is no, but we will get there over time because it's a long argument. In fact, as a premise of this conversation, for the sake of the argument, we will assume that magic does exist, it is real, and with that premise in mind, whether science can prove it or can prove magic or the effectiveness of magic. I don't want to spoil too much about it. Hopefully you will stick around until the end. It's going to be a bit philosophical and exploring how magic really works and how science works and whether the two can be combined. So before we get started, I'd like to remind you that this project, Angela Symposium, can only stay alive if you support it. So if you have the means, I would immensely appreciate it if you considered supporting my work on Patreon, PayPal, Coffee, YouTube memberships, checking out my services at drangelapuca.com. You can get tutoring sessions, private lectures with me. You can also get one-to-one on my Patreon. I definitely recommend joining my Patreon community because besides helping my project, you will join a fantastic community of academically minded, fantastic people. I really adore my Patreon community, and you get a more continuous contact with me because I always give priority to my patrons, and you will get Magus lectures every month and Zoom conversations with me and the community every month, as well as a Discord server. So thank you so much for considering, and the links are in the info box, in bio, in a pinned comment, everywhere. So thank you. And now we can start with our topic, which hopefully is not too controversial, but it might very well be, because I know that practitioners, and I know that many of you guys watching are practitioners, would really love the idea of magic being proven by science. Now, my argument, as I will unfold it throughout this video, is that not only I personally don't think, until evidence suggests otherwise, that it is not possible, not because magic is not real. Again, we are using as a premise that magic is, and also I will argue that it's not even desirable. But let's go one step at a time. So as we begin, it's important to establish that our discussion takes for granted, as I said, and it's important to reiterate the validity and reality of magical practices as understood within various esoteric traditions. Our focus today is not on questioning these practices themselves, but rather on examining the relationship between these practices and the methodologies of scientific inquiry. So we will discuss the fundamental differences in how science and magic operate, why science struggles to validate magical experiences, and why seeking such validation might not even be desirable. So let's define the terms, not in general. So if you're an academic, don't get angry with me because academics can literally discuss for absolute ages over definitions. So these are operative terms, though, so that when we use them in our argument, we understand what we are talking about. So magic, for the purpose of our discussion, is the following. In esoteric contexts, magic often involves the manipulation of energies, the invocation of spiritual entities, or the harnessing of occult forces to bring about real-world changes. Magic is deeply personal, often subjective, and frequently tied to specific cultural or spiritual frameworks. Science, on the other hand, is defined by a set of methodological and philosophical commitments to observation, empirical evidence, and reproducibility. Scientific inquiry seeks to explain phenomena by identifying consistent, observable, and measurable mechanisms in the natural world. In today's episode, we will explore several key questions. Can the subjective and deeply personal experiences central to magic ever be fully captured by the objective methodologies of science? What are the implications of trying to fit magical practices into a scientific framework? And most importantly, would proving magic through scientific means actually benefit the esoteric community? Or could it, in fact, undermine the very essence of what makes magic meaningful? Now, let's explore why science cannot prove magic. And again, this is my argument. So, let us begin by exploring the core differences in approach between science and magic. Scientific inquiry is built upon principles of observation, measurement, and repeatability. These principles allow scientists to create knowledge that is universally understandable and, crucially, independent of the observer. For instance, the boiling point of water at sea level is always 100 degrees Celsius, regardless of who performs the measurement. Contrast this with magic, which is intrinsically linked to the practitioner's personal and subjective experience. Magical practices often draw on forces and energies that are deeply personal and inherently tied to the practitioner's intent, emotions, and spiritual alignment. For example, consider a ritual meant to bring prosperity. Its effectiveness could be influenced by the practitioner's will, the specific materials used, or even the timing relative to lunar cycles. Each of these factors introduces a level of subjectivity that defies straightforward scientific quantification. Furthermore, magic is frequently contextual, rooted in specific cultural or temporal settings. A healing spell in one tradition might involve herbs and chants specific to that culture's historical and geographical context. Elements that hold symbolic meaning within that specific culture but may be meaningless or even counterproductive in another. Turning to the challenges of measurement, consider how science would approach the claim that a particular talisman can ward off negative energy. Scientific instruments are designed to measure physical quantities like mass, temperature, and electrical charge. However, the negative energy ostensibly affected by a talisman isn't quantifiable by any scientific instrument. How then can we measure the talisman's effectiveness in a way that satisfies scientific criteria? An illustrative example is the practice of Reiki, a form of energy healing. Practitioners claim to channel healing energy through their hands, yet this energy does not correspond to any electromagnetic field or other measurable force identified by science. Despite numerous studies attempting to validate Reiki using scientific methods, results have been inconclusive, largely because the supposed healing energy does not have an agreed upon scientific correlate. As we move beyond methodological differences, it's essential also to examine the underlying philosophical approaches of science and magic. Science operates largely under the principles of materialism and reductionism. Materialism asserts that physical matter is the only reality and that everything, including thought, feeling, and consciousness, can be explained in terms of matter and physical phenomena. Reductionism is the approach that attempts to understand complex phenomena by reducing them to the interactions of their parts. In stark contrast, magical thinking is holistic. It perceives the world as an interconnected whole, where physical and non-physical elements are deeply intertwined. Magic does not necessarily seek to dissect the world into smaller parts to understand it, but rather to appreciate or manipulate these connections. Magical practices often involve elements like intention, will, and the manipulation of energies, which are concepts that defy reductionist explanations. Consider a traditional healing ritual in many indigenous cultures, which may incorporate singing, drumming, and the use of sacred plants. These elements work not just on a physical level, which is the only level that science is interested in, but are believed to realign the patient's spiritual energy, which is seen as integral to their physical health. Such practices underscore a belief in the unity and balance of body, mind, and spirit, an approach that is largely absent in scientific medicine, which often focuses on physical symptoms and their direct causes. The divergence between science and magic becomes particularly evident in their ontological and epistemological foundations. Ontology deals with the nature of being, and epistemology with the nature of knowledge. Science, given that it emphasizes the material side, restricts its study to entities that can be observed and measured. Thus, its ontology excludes non material entities or dimensions, which are central to many magical traditions. Magic, on the other hand, frequently operates within realms that include spirits, deities, and other metaphysical entities. These are often experienced subjectively and are part of a reality that is just as vivid and meaningful to practitioners as the physical world is to scientists. Take, for example, the practice of divination, such as tarot reading or scrying. Practitioners of these arts claim to gain knowledge about the past, present, and future through means that defy empirical investigation and often rely on a symbolic interpretation of the tools used. Science, which demands observable, repeatable, and empirical evidence, finds no basis to validate these claims within its framework. The philosophical clash between science and magic raises profound questions about what is considered real, how we know what we know, and what limits we accept on the scope of a human understanding. For practitioners of magic, the experiences and effects are real and meaningful within their worldview. However, when subjected to the scrutiny of scientific validation, these practices often appear unsubstantiated or misinterpreted, leading to a dismissal of their value and a misunderstanding of their purpose. Pseudoscience refers to a collection of beliefs and practices mistakenly regarded as being based on the scientific method. These are often characterized by exaggerated claims that do not adhere to rigorous standards of evidence and methodology. Pseudoscience lacks the openness to evaluation by other experts in the field and does not allow for refutation, which are both hallmarks of genuine scientific inquiry. When magical practices are tested using scientific methods, they frequently enter the domain of pseudoscience. This shift occurs because the foundational principles of these practices often cannot be observed, measured, or replicated under controlled conditions. Key criteria for scientific validation. Moreover, the subjective nature of many magical practices, which are deeply personal and contextual, defies the objectivity required by scientific scrutiny. Consider the research into psychic abilities such as telepathy or clairvoyance. These studies often suffer from methodological weaknesses, like small sample sizes, lack of proper blinding, and selective reporting of results. For instance, a study may report positive results without acknowledging instances where no psychic phenomena were observed, leading to a biased representation of the data. Astrology provides another compelling example. Despite its popularity, astrology has consistently failed to produce empirical evidence that supports its predictive claims. Scientific investigations into astrology often reveal the use of vague, generalized statements that could apply to anyone, a technique known as the Forer effect. These studies typically lack rigorous testing and instead rely on subjective interpretations, which cannot be systematically analyzed or replicated. When magical or mystical claims are labeled as pseudoscience, it can have several detrimental effects. Firstly, it can discredit the broader field, affecting both practitioners and those who hold these beliefs sincerely. Secondly, it can lead to public skepticism towards other aspects of esoteric or spiritual practices, reducing their cultural and personal value. Occasionally, proponents of certain magical or psychic practices claim scientific verification to lend credibility to their practices. This misapplication of science not only misleads the public, but also undermines the integrity of genuine scientific inquiry. It can also lead to wasted resources, such as funding for studies that do not adhere to rigorous scientific standards. Now, let's cover also why I would say that scientific validation is not even desirable. Esoteric practices are not just a collection of methods or techniques, they are imbued with deep spiritual and often sacred meanings. These practices serve as bridges connecting practitioners to larger cosmic narratives or to profound spiritual truths that are felt deeply and personally. For example, consider a shamanic journeying ritual, which is believed to allow practitioners to travel to spiritual realms and communicate with spirits. This is not just an exercise in visualization, but a profound spiritual experience that shapes the practitioner's understanding of the universe and their place within it. When such practices are subjected to scientific validation, they are often reduced to their most basic physical or psychological components. This reductionism can strip away the layers of meaning and spiritual significance that define them. For instance, a ritual that involves the use of sacred plants might be analyzed chemically to identify psychoactive compounds, reducing the experience to biochemical interactions in the brain. While such explanations can provide valuable insights, they may also diminish the ritual's perceived sacredness and its broader spiritual context. A clear example can be found in the study of meditation within Buddhist traditions. Science has studied meditation extensively, often focusing on its effect on stress reduction, brain function, and health. However, in its original context, meditation is also a spiritual practice aimed at achieving enlightenment and a deeper understanding of the nature of reality. When scientific studies focus solely on psychological and physiological benefits, they can overlook or undervalue these spiritual dimensions. Magic is far more than a means to alter reality. It is a profound method of connecting with the cosmos and experiencing a sense of unity that transcends ordinary life. Practices such as tarot reading or rune casting are often misconceived as mere fortune telling tools. In truth, these practices offer deep spiritual reflection, helping practitioners to navigate their life paths and make meaningful decisions. The allure of magic lies in its mystery and the unquantifiable, drawing practitioners into a deeper engagement with the mystical aspects of existence. When scientific methods attempt to validate such esoteric practices solely through empirical evidence, such as statistical success rates, they risk overlooking the essence of these practices. Focusing narrowly on accuracy ignores the broader, more significant impact of divination on personal growth and spiritual insight. These practices are not just about predicting future events, but are crucial tools for introspection and understanding one's deeper self and the universe. The endeavor to scientifically validate magical practices can lead to their demystification, stripping them of the mystique that enhances their spiritual significance. This reductionist approach risks rendering them mundane and less spiritually enriching, which can diminish their appeal and efficacy. When the mystery and sacredness are removed, the practices may no longer resonate on a deeper emotional or spiritual level with those who engage in them. For many practitioners, the true power of magical practices lies not in their ability to be empirically validated, but in the profound connections they facilitate. These connections might be with the deeper aspects of the self, with the natural world, with the higher spiritual plane, with deities, with entities. The process of demystification can weaken these connections, reducing a rich, expansive spiritual experience to a simple, explainable phenomenon. It's crucial to recognize that the value of these practices often resides in their ability to evoke a sense of wonder, provide spiritual comfort, and foster an intimate bond with the unseen. Ultimately, by reducing magical practices to something that can be scientifically measured and validated, we risk losing touch with their true essence. These practices serve as vital links to something greater than ourselves, offering pathways to understanding that are not accessible through scientific inquiry alone. It is the ineffable quality of magic that often holds the most value for its practitioners and provides a profound sense of connection that deeply enriches the human experience. Magical practices are often expressions of cultural identity and spiritual belief systems that have been honed over centuries. These practices are not just rituals, they are woven into the social and spiritual fabric of communities, often carrying deep symbolic significance and serving as a means of connecting with ancestral wisdom. When scientific methods are applied to validate these practices, there is a significant risk of cultural imposition, where a predominantly Western scientific perspective might be applied universally without regard for a nuanced understanding of those within the culture. Consider the use of ayahuasca in various indigenous cultures. This psychoactive brew is used in ceremonial context, believed to cleanse the body and mind and connect individuals with the spiritual world. Scientific studies often focus on its potential health benefits or psychoactive properties without acknowledging its complex cultural and spiritual significance. Such reductionist views can strip the practice of its richer, more profound spiritual context, reducing it to merely a drug experience. In discussing the relationship between science and magic, it is essential to clarify that the argument here is not against the scientific investigation of magical practices. In fact, expanding research in any field, including those as esoteric as magic, is fundamentally valuable. It broadens our understanding and invites diverse perspectives that enrich both scientific and non scientific communities alike. However, the crux of the matter lies in recognizing the inherent limitations of the scientific method when applied to the study of magic. Science, by its very nature, employs a reductivist approach that seeks to understand the world by breaking down complex phenomena into simpler, more manageable parts. This method is extremely effective for studying material and quantifiable aspects of reality, but falls short when confronted with the holistic and often intangible aspects of magical practices. Magic, in its essence, operates on levels that often elude physical measurement or empirical validation. Its practices are steeped in cultural, spiritual, and metaphysical contexts that are deeply personal and subjective. While science can study the observable effects of magic or its psychological impacts on individuals, it cannot fully grasp the entire spectrum of what magic encompasses. For example, the sense of connection to the divine, the experience of transcending the mundane, or the feeling of tapping into unseen energies are aspects of magic that are profoundly real to practitioners but remain largely immeasurable by scientific tools. Many practitioners of magic seek validation for their beliefs and practices, hoping to establish that what they experience is not merely unreal or a figment of the imagination. This desire for validation is understandable, as it speaks to a fundamental human need to feel acknowledged, seen, and respected. However, seeking this validation solely through scientific means may be misguided. Science, with its focus on empiricism and objectivity, is not equipped to provide ontological validation for the metaphysical and subjective experiences central to magical practices. It is important for both practitioners and scholars to recognize that the validation of one's personal and spiritual experiences does not need to rely on scientific endorsement. Magic, with its rich traditions and profound impact on its adherents, holds validity in its own right. It operates within a different paradigm, one that values personal experience, spiritual insight, and the interconnectedness of all things. So, while it is beneficial to explore and study the intersections of science and magic, it is crucial to acknowledge that science is not the ultimate arbiter of all forms of knowledge and reality. Embracing a broader view that respects and values different ways of knowing can lead to a more inclusive understanding of the world, one that honors the depth and richness of both scientific and magical realms. So it's clear that the quest for scientific validation of magic is fraught with significant drawbacks, and these include the potential loss of spiritual depth, cultural integrity, and ethical considerations. As we reflect on these points, we must ask ourselves, what truly is the value of a magical practice? Is it in its observable effectiveness, or does its value lie deeper in its connections to our histories, cultures, and personal spiritual journeys? I think the point of this episode is trying to understand something that I find fundamental when talking to people. I have the impression that human beings have the tendency to want to find one truth, like one true methodology that is applicable to everything and anything, one truth. It seems to me like human beings have this tendency to really want to identify what is truth, and this truth is one, and then once you find it, then it's applicable to everything. Now, my challenge here to you is to think differently, I would argue that perhaps reality is more multi-layered than that. I personally believe that and you know that I'm an academic, and I'm not an academic who goes against science. In fact, I adore science and I adore academia. Despite its problems, I still think that it's the best way to get the most accurate knowledge that we can possibly get. That said, science is great and super useful, and I'm grateful for it every day to understand all the physical aspects of our reality. All the things that are material and are physical about us, science can study that better than any other method. That is fantastic, and we should really treasure that. Now, thinking that because science is so incredible and effective in studying the material world, that will necessarily translate into the fact that science can also give us answers about the metaphysical world or the religious experience, that's when we start having problems. Of course, there are parts of parts of academia, like for instance, religious studies or social sciences, that study religious experiences with a different lens, not trying to prove magic in the way that I've described it in this episode, which was more related to the natural science type of method. So yeah, of course, you can study religious experiences and magic from the point of view of religious studies or social sciences, where you explore the beliefs and the meanings and how these things are constructed and their histories and so on. But if we are talking specifically, which was the topic of the video, about, for instance, you cast a spell, is the spell effective? How can I prove scientifically with the scientific method that my spell was effective? I just personally don't think that is possible, because the method of science, which is incredible and super effective to study the material, everything that is material and physical, just falls short when it comes to understanding things that don't only work through the physical world. Because magic, even though it does have an impact on the physical world, causing changing in the physical realm, it doesn't just cause changes there, and it does quite work by the cause and effect that science would analyze. And it doesn't only work through the physical components of the whole system that is involved in this whole mechanism of turning the desired spell into a change in one's reality. So yeah, I suppose the point of my video is that, one, I don't think we should assume that if something is very effective in one area and in one department, it necessarily is going to be effective in every other area of knowledge and human endeavor. Two, that I think that natural science is not equipped to understand the way that magic works. Even assuming, which we have done in this video, that magic is real and effective, there are ways that magic even works acausally. We see with Carl Jung and the concept of synchronicity that there is also acausality in how magic works. So the way that magic works is just not, it just, to me, just feels like trying to weigh air with a scale. It's just completely different. So the only thing is that you can really analyze from using the scientific method are just really the physical changes. Then how can you draw really a conclusive link between the spell and all the elements of the spell and the will of the practitioner and the entities involved and the result that you see in the world? So it's just not possible, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that practitioners cannot use some elements of science, although not in a scientific way, because I said science is reductivist and materialist, and magic is very different from that. But throughout history, what we have seen is that practitioners tend to have magic diaries, for instance, to check the effectiveness of their practices. So that is, and I wouldn't call it scientific, but it is an empirical research on your own practice, or the practice of your group or your coven or your order, where you get a sense of what things work and which things don't work, whether there's a specific moon lunation that is going to work better, or a specific herb or a specific type of ritual. And these are things that magicians and witches have done over the ages. But even though it is a sort of an empirical method to understand what works best, it's still not the same as the natural scientific method, because you can still only analyze your own experience, and you cannot really draw back those experiences to the causes of what makes those effective. I think that magic is very experiential, is very based on experiences, and I think that when the practitioners are very attentive to what works and what doesn't work, despite the fact that some people say, "Oh, practitioners ignore when something doesn't work and always pretend that it works." I think, at least in my experience on the field, that's the minority of practitioners. There are practitioners like that, but they are the minority. I think that most practitioners are actually very attentive to their failures, and they try to improve and make their magic more effective. That is an empirical method that is still very much subjective, because it's going to be what works for you, what works, because you are an essential element of the equation in that element. So it would still not be the same as saying, okay, water is going to boil at 100 degrees Celsius regardless. There are always going to be subjective elements. And that's the beauty of magic, in my opinion. Why should we flatten it to make it just boring and physical? Yeah, I'm going to end here because I think that I've been ranting long enough about this. But if you have a different idea, a different view, feel free to share it in the comment. I really want to know what you think about this. And if you disagree, feel free to disagree. And if you are somebody who is funding or conducting or reading about studies trying to prove magic, then let me know. And who knows, maybe I will be proven wrong. I'm always in support of any type of research. So I think that research is always good. I mean, knowing more is always better than knowing less. So why would I be? I'm definitely not opposed to this kind of research. Even though I believe that it's not possible, I still think that that kind of research should be done, because who knows, maybe I might be proven wrong. Or maybe not. We will see. I'm always open to the possibility of being wrong, and I think that that's a healthy attitude to have, not being too rooted and radicated and crystallized in your views and opinions, but having those, but at the same time, and always entertaining the thought of, I could be wrong, but I've got to have evidence to change my mind. So yeah, let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section, whether you agree or disagree, and leave me a microscope emoji if you watched until this point. Do you have a microscope emoji? I'm sure that I have it, but a lot of people then don't have the same emojis that I have. So either a scientist or a science-looking emoji, or a microscope, whatever you've got in your keyboard. Or you can just type microscope. I know that some people just type the name of the emoji when they don't have it. So that's fine as well. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and please consider supporting my work. Check my website, drangelafuca.com. I have online courses, one on the left-hand path and one on Italian witchcraft. You can book tutoring sessions, you can buy individual lectures, and also check out my Patreon, my PayPal, and Coffee. So I really hope that you consider supporting me, because that's how this project exists. So thank you for considering, and otherwise, if you like this episode, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate the notification bell so that you will always be notified when I upload a new rant. Yeah, also share my videos around, subscribe if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell, and share broadly all the symposium videos. Just harass all of your friends and family and everybody. I'm kidding, maybe not. So thank you all so much for being here, and I hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.